Hey everybody, this is James Pelton. I hope you are having a wonderful Tuesday. So we are going to talk some more real estate today. You guys know on my channel, I've traditionally been more crypto, but there are, how do I word this? There are safer ways to invest than the crypto market, which is pretty much anything else, honestly. But I will always love crypto, of course, but do want to show you guys what's out there on a real estate front. And so that's what we're going to be talking about here today. Before we get going, welcome, Andy. Thank you for becoming a YouTube member. Again, I've been doing Monday morning members only videos, and we've actually been praying with my audience. And so it really fun time. I love my community. So thanks for joining. Welcome, Chance. Welcome, Easy Smooth Listening. Thank you for being a member as well. So appreciate having you. So we have here today Dallas Heilman. Dallas, can you go ahead and start off? Just give us a little bit of your background, and then we'll talk about your story a little bit after that.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm a real estate expert. I own 32 rental units, all scattered around Utah. So it's been a pretty big booming market actually for the last few years, which has been a lot of fun. But I do all residential real estate. So everything I own is mostly 2-bed, 1-bath units. I've got a couple 1-bed, 1-baths and a few 3-bed, 2-bath units, but mostly 2-bed, 1-bath units. And it's been amazing for me. So I worked in a really kind of hustling job. I worked at doing door-to-door sales. I was the guy that came and pounded on your door and tried to sell you pest control for a while. It was great. It was a grind. I didn't love everything about it, but I loved that it made good money, and I used that money to buy real estate. And from the time I bought my first rental property, I was actually able to replace my income with rental income within about 3 years. And so making a 6-figure income from rental cash flow. And I was like, that's enough for me. So I quit my sales job, and now I do real estate full time, and I do coaching, real estate investing coaching. So
love it. So I think you've done what I think a lot of people in my audience would like to do is, they have their 9-to-5 job, and it's like, hey, I'd like to get passive income to kind of replace this, get out of this. Do you want to maybe talk a little bit more about that transition? Was it hard for you? Were you nervous while you were doing that? Or tell us a little bit about that, getting out of your normal day job.
So just to make sure I'm talking about the right thing, you're talking about the moment where I decided, hey, I'm done working. I'm going to quit my job and fully rely on this.
Yes.
With real estate, it was not scary at all. For me to get to the spot where I was comfortable doing that, I was actually making almost double what we spend. So my wife and I spend about $70,000 a year. We're pretty frugal. Like I make decent money with my rentals, but we don't spend a lot. So we were spending about $70,000 a year, and I had done the projections, and I was like, oh, by the end of this year, we're going to have made about, I thought it was going to be about 140,000. I think it was like 138,000 is what it actually ended up being that year. But like, we're making pretty much double what we're spending. And for me, that was comfortable. I was like, I feel comfortable, quitting my job, knowing that I can even have a bad month and have some unexpected expenses and still be able to cover my monthly needs. So that's what I love about real estate is it's so dang reliable. Like I sign all of my real estate is long-term rentals, which is maybe not quite as profitable as like short-term rentals with Airbnb, but way more reliable. I sign 12-month leases where they're legally obligated to pay me a certain amount of money on certain dates. And so I can pretty much rely on and predict that income is going to be coming in continuously. And so I didn't feel like it was scary, but what was scary was I think one thing people don't think about when they're quitting their job for a side hustle, especially if it's a passive thing where it's like, doesn't take too much time, is you can't just like quit and have nothing to do, especially if you're young and have energy. Like being retired I was 28 when I quit my job, and I was like, oh, I'm technically retired off my rentals. And that sucked. Honestly, I was really enjoying it for like 2 months. And then I was so bored because all my friends were still working. You can only pick up so many new hobbies. And so for me, that was the hardest part of the transition, is having I didn't design my life, right? That's what I call it now, is design your life. You got to know, what does your ideal life look like when you get to the point that you can retire off of your side hustles? And what are you going to do with your time? And what are you going to do to be fulfilled? And if you just think that sitting around and enjoying your time to relax and go travel all the time, like that is fun, but it's going to get really old. And so you got to have a way to have a game plan or have something figured out to find fulfillment in your life.
That's interesting. That's exactly what I experienced. I sold a software business and retired. I was a bit older. I was like 30. But the same thing, I'm like, oh man, this is going to be awesome. And then, after 2 days of watching everything that there is on Netflix, you're kind of like, oh, I got to find something else to do. This isn't how humans were designed to live. And so I'll experience that same thing. You gotta find something.
Yeah.
Can you kind of explain how your first few houses? So I want to talk about, how you've scaled since then, but when you're first starting out into real estate, first off, how did you kind of know what to do? Were you just kind of trying things, or did you read some books? And then maybe then you can talk about what that experience was like. You found a property, and then, what were you nervous when you were putting in an offer on it? Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, to be honest, it was a total whirlwind, and I got very lucky in this situation. So here's what happened: is I was doing my door-to-door sales job, and I was making good money, but I was also working really hard, so I wasn't necessarily doing great things. I had some mutual funds and stocks, and I had some money in crypto, not a lot, but I hadn't done anything amazing with investing it. I just kind of compile it. It was just stockpiled, I was just holding on to it. So I had a college buddy of mine call me, and he's like, "Hey, Dallas, what are you doing with all of your sales money? Like, are you investing in anything?" I was like, "I've got a little bit, but not really." He's like, "Well, Dallas, you should invest in real estate." And he's a real estate agent. So obviously he's incentivized to sell me a rental property. And I knew that, which is fine. I didn't have any issues with that. But I'd only heard horror stories of real estate investing. I didn't know anybody who was successfully investing in real estate. And I'd heard a few people here and there be like, "Oh yeah, tenants are the worst, toilets, and it's the worst having tenants." And I had heard just a handful of those. I was like, I don't think that I'm interested in investing in real estate. I've heard the horror stories. Well, he's like, "Dallas, before you decline it, like before you say no, you should at least talk to my father-in-law, who is a successful real estate investor, and see what real estate investing has done for him." So this guy's name was Dave. We went to lunch together, and Dave kind of just told me his story. He's like, "Yeah, he worked as a firefighter. He didn't make great money. I think he was making, like less than a college graduate wage." But he's like, and then he got into real estate investing in his late 30s. And once he figured it out, he started buying them as fast as he could. And by the time he was in his late 40s, he had a really glamorous, cushy lifestyle. And he kind of let me know, like, showed me his specific results for his experience. He's like, "This is the best thing I ever did. My biggest regret is that I didn't get started way sooner." So like, you're in a way better situation. You're making more money than I was, and you're way younger than I was. Like, this would be what I would do if I was younger, is get into real estate sooner. And so he's like, "And if you want to do it, I'd be happy to mentor you. Like, I'll look at the deal with you and make sure it looks like a good property, and I'll teach you how to be a landlord and do all that stuff." And so that kind of gave me the confidence. And in hearing Dave's story, I was like, okay, maybe this is worth considering. So I told Braden, I was like, "You know what? Let's go look at some properties. Let's go see what you can find for me, and if we'll take a look at it." So I was like pretty excited. He found a property. I ran the numbers myself, and then I had Dave help me look at the numbers. And he's like, "Yeah, this looks like a great property. I think you should do it." So I'm like super excited about this. And then we go do the walkthrough, and I show up, and it's like super crappy. There's like roof tiles falling off the roof. Some of the siding is coming off on the front of the building. One of the units had like tons of trash and like bikes and toys and stuff just like scattered in the yard. And it was just like a crappy property. And so I went from being in one of the units. I actually didn't know it when I was buying it, but it ended up being a meth contaminated unit. They were cooking meth in the kitchen, and I wasn't smart enough to know at the time that I should have gotten an inspection. But anyway, so I bought this, and there's like holes in the doors from like people punching holes in the doors and like just nasty stuff. There's like smoke that had accumulated and started dripping orange drips down the walls in one of the bedrooms. It was just nasty. So I went from being super excited to being like super scared. I'm like, man, this is not going to be fun. So I called Dave. I'm like, "Hey, Dave, like, I know I'm under contract on this, but I think I'm going to cancel the contract. Like, this is not seem like a good investment for me." And he said something to me. He said, "Well, Dallas, do the numbers work?" I was like, "Yeah, the numbers work. The numbers look amazing, but the property is super crappy." He's like, "No, like we factored all the repairs and stuff into there. Like, if the numbers work, we're not buying the property because it's cute or because you'd like to live there yourself or because you like to look at it. If we're buying a rental property, we're buying it for the numbers, and the numbers looked really, really good. So I think that you should still do it." And anyway, I talked to him, and I talked about some of my concerns. He's like, "Look, there's nothing that a little bit of money and a little bit of love and care can't fix. And the best deals take a little bit of effort at the beginning to fix up some deferred maintenance." He's like, "I think you should do it." So I took a leap of faith. I really was scared about it, but I had a mentor that knew what he was doing, and I just kind of trusted him and took the leap, and it was amazing. That property, I mean, it started bringing about $1,000 a month of cash flow from day one. And then over the next couple of years, I actually learned how to manage it better. And now it brings in about $3,300 a month in cash flow from the one property.
Amazing.
So it's great. It's a fourplex. But yeah, super scary, very, very scary. But having a mentor is kind of what made it possible.
Awesome. Yeah. And that's, again, that's, I think, one of the things we'll talk about this in a little bit, but maybe for people who feel like they don't have a mentor, maybe that's something that you could be for them. I think that's part of what your goal is.
I mean, that's my job, right? That's
Yep.
what after I quit my job and retired, I was unfulfilled. So I started coaching people, and I made a business. Like Six-Figure Landlord is my company, but we specifically do coaching for people getting into real estate.
Yeah. And I love that. Actually, a question I commonly get, and you just answered it, is, well, if you're making so much money off of this, why are you getting other people involved? And it's what you just said is, once you've got your kind of financial needs taken care of, there's something in us that's like, hey, I got to still do something. I want to be fulfilled, and teaching others and helping others achieve their goals is a really great way to do that. So
Yeah.
love that.
And I think it's twofold. I think that humans love to be learning and growing. And for me, like I love helping people get into real estate, and it's so fun to help them through that process. But I also equally love challenging myself in a new business. Like I've never done an online business before, a couple of years ago or a few years ago. And it's been so fun to like have to learn all these new skills and push myself and like, yeah, I'm working harder sometimes than I wish I was working, but it's fun to like do something new. And so I think that's another part that, again, if you're thinking of your game plan and long-term strategy, you got to always have something that's pushing you to be your best self and pushing you to learn and grow.
Love it. Love it. So a lot of my audience, some people, we're all in different capital situations. We'll put it that way. Can you kind of talk about what's like the minimum amount of capital that you would say, oh no, you can't get involved with real estate. You only have $16. What's kind of the minimum where you would say someone can get started?
Yeah. I mean, I would say if you have wealthy connections, like maybe you got rich parents that are willing to, help you get started and partner with you on a property, then it's like, if you've got those connections, then really you could use zero of your own dollars. But if you don't have experience yet, and you don't have connections of people who already know you and trust you, then you're going to be using your own capital, right? Once you have experience, it's a lot easier to get other people's capital because you know what you're doing and they'll trust you a lot more. But for your first deal, it's just time. It's tough. It's tough unless you have somebody that already trusts you. So if you got somebody that trusts you and was willing to be a financing partner, then $0. But if that's not the case, if you're doing it by yourself to get started, I would say like 10K or 15K if you're willing to move. So my favorite strategies are owner-occupied strategies for getting started. If you're buying your first rental, ideally we're going to buy something where we go buy maybe a duplex. You live in one side of it, rent out the other side. After a year or a handful of months, we're going to move out and do it again. But now you've got both sides rented out on that first property. And so that's the best strategy for starting, because we can get started with FHA loans. It's 3.5% down. So you could buy a $200,000 duplex and you'd only be putting $7,000 down, So if you had, $10,000 to $15,000, that's generally going to be enough for that. But even if you have a little bit less, there are loans that are 0% down, like USDA is like the United States Department of Agriculture. They offer loans if you're willing to live like 20 minutes off of the major highways. They offer loans that are 0% down. You do pay closing costs, so maybe $5,000 of closing costs. And you have to live there, live there for a year. You can't buy a multifamily property with that, but you could buy a single family home, live there for a handful of months or a year, and then buy another single family home and then keep that first one as a rental property, right? So those are kind of going to be the most common low budget strategies that we help people with. And I'd say, 5,000 down to like have that extra step before it's a rental. You have to live in it. It's not making you money yet, but it will. Or if you can do a duplex with an FHA loan, probably 10 to 15,000 for that one.
Okay. Yeah. And that's why I recommend, if you're younger, if you're in, your early 20s, you don't have a family yet, this is the best time to get into some of this stuff, because it's way easier for a single 21-year-old to go move, 20 minutes off of a highway in the middle of nowhere, Nebraska, or wherever you're at, than it is for if you got a wife and 4 kids. It's a lot harder to do some of this stuff. It doesn't mean you can't, but it's just going to be a little bit more difficult. So,
well, and the USDA loans are actually surprising what is considered rural for them. Like I live in Saratoga Springs. I'm like 8 minutes off the highway, and in Utah, Saratoga Springs, Utah, if any of you guys are from Utah. And just like 5 minutes away from me is Eagle Mountain, Utah. And Eagle Mountain, most of it, or almost all of Eagle Mountain, is considered rural, but it's booming. There's tons of new houses and new developments being built out there. It's just like the up and coming area, and it's far enough away from the city that it's still considered rural, but it's not going to feel like you're on a farm town. Like it's still like a whole suburban area that's growing really fast, tons of new buildings and restaurants being built. But it's because it's up and coming, it's still considered rural for USDA. So it doesn't mean you don't need to live in the boonies.
Okay, very good. Another question I had. So for people who have more capital and are more looking for passive income, is that possible in real estate? Or what would you recommend for somebody who has a bunch of capital? They're not that involved in real estate. Is this something they should, consider?
Definitely. Yeah. So real estate, I mean, if you're doing it totally passively, then you'll get returns that are going to be maybe slightly better than the stock market, maybe 10 to 18% rate of return by doing it totally passively, which is still good. Not as good as what you can get with being a little bit involved. So it really depends on your situation. For people that are like, I've got a ton of money and I've got no time, like I don't want to think about this at all, then the best option is working with a turnkey provider. So there's companies out there that's like, hey, we'll find houses, we'll do any rehab that's needed, we'll do pretty much everything for you. We'll manage the property once you have it, get the tenants in there and everything. And we just basically need you to give us the capital for it and sign a loan to, have the bank fund the rest. And they'll do everything for you. And that's going to be the most passive way to do it. But you're looking at, 10, 12, maybe 15%, maybe 18 if you get lucky. So it's not amazing. If you're willing to be a little bit involved, and this is what I help most of my students do, is like, hey, we're still going to use our capital. We're not trying to get too creative and like having to find tons of partners. And maybe down the road we do, but like for getting your first property, let's just use your own capital. Let's just be investors, right? Use our money to make us more money. And but we're going to find our own deals and we're going to self-manage the property. I'd be expecting you to put in 5 hours a week or so when we're looking for properties and when we're like closing on the property. That's the worst part, is like the sifting through deals and trying to find the good ones, and then like getting under contract and doing the due diligence and the homework, because there's like time constraints and sometimes it's just like that's the busiest part. But I'd say 5 hours a week for that period. And then once you have the property, about 30 minutes per month per unit to manage it. So if you buy a duplex, maybe plan on spending an hour a month ongoing to like deal with tenants. And most months it's going to be 10 minutes just doing the bookkeeping. Other months you might have turnover. When you have a turnover, it's going to take you about 3 hours. But on average across the year, probably about 30 minutes per month per unit. And if you do that, then we're usually able to find closer to 20, sometimes up to 30 or higher percent rate of return. So yeah, it just depends on your situation and how involved you want to be.
Okay, super helpful. A couple more questions, then I'd like to talk through your training course and how people. I think getting started is sometimes people's hardest thing. It's like, okay, I want to get involved with real estate. What do I do? But a couple questions before that. Do you feel like now is a good time to get into real estate? I know people get nervous with rates are higher and the market doesn't seem quite the way it used to be. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a great time. It's not as fun right now, and I'll tell you why. So the good news about the higher interest rates, and I think everybody knows that interest rates are a lot higher right now, which if you have a higher interest rate, that means your monthly mortgage payment is more expensive, which means your cash flow is not as high as it could be or as it was. The good news about the higher interest rates is it is putting downward pressure on the prices. And so we're able to buy houses for cheaper, but this numbers still don't look exciting because even though it's a cheaper purchase price, the higher interest rates still make the cash flow just like not as incredible as it was. If we were looking at properties 2 years ago, it's like, man, when you have money to buy a property, everything looks amazing. There's so many great options. So the good news about buying right now is we can lock in the same property at a discount. We can buy it for a cheaper price. And even though it's not cash flowing well or as well as it could be for the first year or two, or maybe even 3, eventually we're hoping, and no one has a crystal ball, I can't say this will for sure happen, but the hope and belief of most investors and most economists is that eventually rates will drop down at least a little bit, maybe not back down to 3%, but maybe even 4.5% or 5%. And we take a property that we bought for a cheaper price, and then it's really easy to refinance. Once we have better rates available, we'll just refinance it. Now we've got the cheaper property and eventually with a cheaper interest rate, and now we've got the best of both worlds. And so it takes a little bit more of a long-term vision right now. And it also takes a lot more looking at deals that don't work, because we're never going to buy a property that doesn't produce positive cash flow from day one. And there's just more deals that are like too much on the edge or not positive cash flow enough, that it takes more sifting before we find the right deal. And it's annoying. I wish I could say differently, but that's the downside of the market right now. Is it's just finding the right deals is more of a headache. So if you're willing to put up with that, we can secure some great deals that are going to be good right now and then amazing in the long run.
Okay, very good. I mean, we've got some good questions from the audience. So audience, ask your questions now. Anything real estate related. Dallas is the real estate expert. So yeah, bring all those up. And then once we get through my questions here, again, I'm selfish YouTuber. I ask my questions first, but then we'll bring up all your questions. So yeah, this is awesome. I own a couple properties, but I'm completely hands off. I'm property manager. I don't do anything. And like you said, that cuts into the profits quite a bit. So I don't really know very much about real estate. I just know it's something that people get into. And so that's what I've done. How do you compare the risk in real estate? Obviously, my audience is used to crypto, so we're used to just you lose all your money all the time. But how does real estate compare in your mind to stocks? And what are the potential risks? Like, do you hear a lot of horror stories of people losing a bunch of money and things like that?
Yeah, yes and no. So I'll tell you what the risks are, and I feel like they're very easy to mitigate. So the risks are going to be, number one, if you get a property and poorly manage it. So I teach self-management, and if you get a property in a bad part of town, a bad neighborhood, like those can be great properties if you're a great manager. But if you let those tenants that are lower quality tenants just kind of like, oh, I hope they pay their rent on time, like hopefully it comes in, and then don't take action if they're late or whatever, then like you're going to get in a bad situation pretty quick. And people they're going to be like, oh, sweet, I can like not pay rent and nothing happens. So no big deal. So if that's one of the risks, I think, is if you're buying a bad prop or in a bad neighborhood and you're not an expert manager, that's going to be a bad risk. And so I would say for my new investors, even when I'm coaching them, I say, hey, I use a website called Neighborhood Scout. You can kind of get a crime heat map. I'm like, we don't want to buy in the darkest, highest crime areas as your first rental. Like maybe down the road, you might want to take on that risk for the extra income that it can produce, but don't start with that. So that'd be one risk, is buying the wrong property for your management skill set or skill level. I would say another risk is being too leveraged without capital. So I love leverage, and having as much leverage as I can have is amazing. I get the smallest down payment loans I always can. But when you've got smaller down payment loans, your mortgage is going to be higher. And if you have any like delayed rents or somebody not paying, then that means you're paying it out of your own pocket. So the more leveraged you are, the more you need to have cash reserves available, or have like a line of credit where you have access to cash at least. And that was the most horror stories I hear of people losing money in real estate was during the big crash of 2008, where people, it wasn't just that the property values were going down. It doesn't matter if the property values go down if you don't have to sell it, but people were over leveraged, and it's like, man, I can't pay my other bills. I can't keep my own house unless I sell this rental property. And then they're selling it at a loss because they're being forced to sell it because they didn't have adequate cash reserves. And so that's another risk, is we do have it's not like crypto where you're like, oh, I'm just not going to put any more money in because I'm out of money right now. Like you're going to have these mortgage payments, and hopefully your tenants are paying that. But in a bad economy, maybe you're more likely to have tenants stop paying rent because they don't have money either. And so if you're, I would just say, make sure you're having sufficient cash reserves. And to put a number to that, I would say like have cash laying around or access to cash on a line of credit of at least 3 months of like all of your expenses, all of your mortgage payments for all of your properties, including your house and rental properties. So,
okay. Nope.
Yeah.
Very
And then
good.
other than that, I don't feel like there's a ton of risk. Like property values might go down, but if you can ride it out, if it's a cash flow producing property, theoretically, according to historical data, rents stay strong even in down economies. So as long as we're collecting that rent, as long as we're not having squatters that are not paying us, as long as we're collecting the rent, we should be able to continue to float that property. And as long as you're not forced to sell it during a bad economic time, then it's really hard to lose money.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of the nice thing. Like you said, if it's producing cash flow, there's really not any reason to sell it until it gets to the price that you're kind of wanting it to. And for a lot of people, they never want to sell. It's just, I want
Yeah.
to get this cash forever. And, that's kind of my goal. So very cool. So let's talk about, I want to talk about there's a free mini course is what you offer here. I'd kind of like to get the experience for somebody who's not involved with real estate at all. what does it look like for them getting this free mini course now to when they get their first rental property? What does that experience look like? They go through this, then they join a coaching program, and what does that look like for them? How much work is involved? Can you kind of walk us through that process?
Yeah, great question. So if someone was to get my free mini course, it's going to be, I think it's 12 videos in there, and it's going to give you a really solid understanding of like, oh, I totally get why people invest in real estate and why, I mean, there's a quote from Andrew Carnegie. He said 90% of millionaires have become so through real estate or through owning real estate. And after watching this free training, it'll be super apparent why that is. You're like, oh my gosh, there's so many ways to make money in real estate and make tons and tons of money. And I think that'll be the biggest takeaway from that. And then I give tips. I give 4 steps to get started and 4 mistakes to avoid. So it's like, sweet, I got a high level idea of like, if I was to go out and do it myself, I know how to find properties. I know how to analyze properties. I know some tips and tricks for like winning contracts and negotiating. So I get some free tips and tricks and advice inside there. And so I think with the free mini course, if you're totally a do-it-yourself kind of person, it's like you'll get a good direction and you could go do it by yourself, which is scary. So then really where the coaching comes in, like obviously if you like the free mini course, we're going to be reaching out and you can book a call to talk with my team and see if you want to join our coaching program. And the added value there is you're going to get a lot more detailed instruction about the whole process. Instead of just 4 high-level overview steps, it's going to be very, very detailed instruction. And really the values in the coaching, right? Every single property is different. Every deal is unique. Every person's situation is different. And the loan products they're going to need to use are going to be different. And there's not like a one-size-fits-all with real estate, unfortunately. And so that's really where it comes in is we can like hold your hand the whole way. It's like, hey, we're going to teach you the tools. You're going to go out and do as much of the assignments and homework that we assign as you can by yourself. And then we hop on calls once every couple of weeks usually and talk with you about what you learned and what questions you have and answer or give you, your next few steps to take and kind of just make it a done with you program. So it's very easy and very comfortable. Look at the deal with you to make sure we're not buying any bad eggs or anything like that. So anyway, that's kind of the process. And then once you're in the program, we expect about 3 to 5 hours per week from our students up until we get our first property. Our goal is to have our students get their first property within about 3 to 6 months of joining the program. 3 months is kind of, we're going pretty quick. 6 months is like, hopefully everybody's getting a property within 6 months. But yeah, we expect about 3 to 5 hours a week during that time. And then once you have the property, plan on about 30 minutes per month per unit that you own.
Okay, very good. No, that's so people that sign up for the free mini course and then the coaching, what do you see that holds people back from being successful? I know there's probably a lot of people that sign up, obviously for the free. When you don't have any money invested, there's probably a lot of people that sign up for the free mini course that never do anything.
Yeah, of course.
What do you kind of see are the reasons that people fall off and are not successful with this?
Yeah, so I think the biggest barrier we have to face is financing. So whether that's like, oh man, I'm totally broke, like we're trying to leverage partnerships, right? At that point, we're raising other people's money to help you invest, and that's very possible. But if you have no experience and you don't have rich connections, like people that have money that know you and trust you already, then we can do it. But it's just as harder. It's a lot harder without experience, and that's probably our biggest hang up. And even for those people, like it's a lifetime membership. So if we can land a partnership and get started sooner, great. If not, then we're just going to wait till we can save up, $5,000 to $15,000 and do one of those other strategies we talked about. But that's probably our biggest hang up is people that just don't have the funds, and then landing a partnership it's just hard. I mean, it's doable, but it's hard if they're not your family member or close friends. And then I would say our next biggest hang up is just like, I would call it, I guess, maybe analysis paralysis, where they're looking at deals and they're kind of looking for the best deal and also like scared to move on any deal because it's like they want to be ultra conservative running their numbers, which is great. But then the properties don't look like they're going to cash flow. And it's like, this will cash flow. So maybe people that are just a little bit timid. And I feel like we get over that one pretty easily. Like with coaching, that one's not hard to overcome. The biggest one that even with coaching is hard to overcome or just takes time to overcome is going to be the financing side.
Yeah, I think too, from my experience with a lot of training courses and things like that, a lot of people think it's going to be like a fairly easy, like, oh, I'll just sign up for this and then immediately I'll be successful. And then they start to see, oh, actually, there is a bit of work involved. There's going to have to be some commitment on your end. And then sometimes that causes people to fall away too. So
Well, and that's another thing is I have a lot of students that, the coaching calls are kind of baked into the program. You watch, 15 videos, and there's a spot where you click on our calendar link to book your call. So it's like very easy to book your call. But if you're not on there, like, watching the videos and getting to those spots, then you'll just like not book calls. And we have a handful of students that have signed up, and like we text them once a week to like check in and see how they're doing. And we send them emails all the time. And like, we're doing everything we can to keep them engaged and keep them active. And it's like, crickets, we just get ghosted. It's like, man, they invested in this program, and like we're doing everything on our part to get them to use it, but you have to use it, right? If you're going to buy something and not use it, you're not going to get results from it. So yeah, that's another thing is, yeah, but if you're putting in 3 to 5 hours a week, initially it's watching videos, and then it's, analyzing deals and looking at deals is going to be a large majority of it. If you're doing 3 to 5 hours a week, then it's going to be pretty easy.
okay. Yeah, and a lot of times that's why I encourage people. A lot of times people are like, I don't want to pay for a course, I don't want to pay for coaching or anything like that. But once you get that money in, for me, that's how I work. But once I have that money in, there's a lot more for me to actually take action on it. Whereas like this free training course, if I was doing that alone, it's like, well, that was free, I probably don't need to do anything. But if I pay, for some coaching, then it's like, hey, I better take advantage of this.
Yeah.
So
you're locked in.
Yep, you're locked in. You got some skin in the game, as we like to call it. So a couple questions from the audience here, and then we'll wrap up. First off, Ken would like to know, how do you deal with tenants who don't want to leave and don't want to pay rent? I think that is one of people's biggest fears.
Yeah. So if you let it go too long without doing anything about it, it gets harder and harder and harder, because it's like, oh, I've lived here so long without any negative repercussions. Like, what's going to change now? But if you're on it from the very beginning, you'll generally avoid that like mindset where they feel like they can just stay there forever. So what I always do is the software I use, like it always emails them when they're past due. And if they go a little bit more, like if they get to like 5 days past due, they get an email at 3 days past due. Then if they get to 5 days past due, I'm going to be texting them. If they don't respond, I'll be calling them. And then if it gets to like, I don't know, maybe even like 7 or 8 days past due, then like for sure by 10 days past due, if I haven't been able to get in touch and like make a game plan to get them paid, then I'm posting a notice on their door at 10 days, or before 10 days. In my lease, I can do it as soon as 5 days. So sometime between 5 and 10 days, I'm posting an official notice on their door. And that kind of makes it real. It's like, oh shoot, like if I don't pay rent, I'm going to get kicked out of this place. And a lot of times that's going to be enough to like get them to create a game plan with you and get caught up. But then there's people that just don't have the money. Like even if they want to get caught up and they're communicating with you, it's like, hey, I just lost my job. This isn't going to work out. And then at that point, it's time to just get them out. Like in my lease, an early termination results in a penalty of basically 1 month's rent as a early termination penalty. But it's like, hey, like I totally get that this isn't going to work for you, and like we're not going to be able to continue your lease. So what if we do this? Like, let's just have you move out. If you'll make this smooth and easy for us, like let's get you out by Friday. Give them a few days, whatever. If you can get out by Friday, then we'll give you a standard move out, no additional fees. We'll still do the cleaning costs, and we'll have to take any past due rent out of your deposit. But like we're not going to charge any early termination penalties. We'll just make this a really smooth, easy, standard move out. Let's just get you out and move on, so that way you don't have all these massive fees. So usually a compromise like that works. And then if they're not, a lot of times they even present it like this, like, hey, so we have two options. Option one is we can do a court eviction, like where we are going to file an eviction notice. It's obviously going to go through because you're not paying rent, which is a clear violation of the lease. And then with that, you're going to have a few $1,000s of court fees. You'll be legally obligated to pay us all past due rent, plus all the late fees that accumulated. And you'll be getting a garnishment, like the court's going to garnish your funds. They're going to go to your employer and let them know that all of your funds go to us to pay us back for these costs. Or let's just make this a smooth process and let's get you out of here with a clean move out. So usually a threat of eviction is going to be enough to like give them a good option to get them out of there. I've never actually had to do a full eviction. I've only had like one person where I was actually calling eviction lawyers. And it sucks if you have to do it, or if you let it go too long and that's what you have to do, then that's what you got to do. It takes a month and costs a couple $1,000s that you hopefully can recoup, but odds are that tenant's broke and you're not going to recover those funds. But if you don't stay on top of it early, that's going to be your only option.
Yeah, it's one of the hazards of the trade. That
Yep.
was I went to a foreclosure auction once because I've heard about foreclosures also as, hey, that's something, valuable. You should get into that. And there was some really good deals, but the first action was you had to get the tenants out. And I was like,
Yep.
oh man, that's not what I don't want that to be the first thing I do with this new investment. So no,
Yeah,
totally
yeah,
get
that's
that.
for not for the faint of heart. One other thing that you should do, I guess, as part of maybe even before you post the official notice, is like when I'm calling them because they're past due, I want to give them some resources. In most states, and maybe every state, you can dial 211. It's kind of like 911, where like instead of going to the emergency, it goes to like human resource assistance, kind of the government, local government programs for housing and other emergency needs like that. And so a lot of states are going to have programs to help people that are past due on rent get caught up and not lose their house. And so, yeah, having them dial 211 or just doing a Google search to say rental assistance programs near me, and try to give them some resources to get the government to help them. I think this last year I got like, I don't know, probably $80,000 of government assistance checks from tenants that were getting past due. It's like, hey, here's this resource, reach out to them and they get approved for an assistance program. And I'm happy and they're happy. And the government program, that's what it's there for. So,
Yep, win-win situation for sure. Okay, here's a question for you. My biggest concern with real estate has always been the government allowing tenants not to pay rent. I know with some of the COVID stuff, sometimes landlords were kind of locked. You can't kick people out because of not paying rent, things like that. Has that been a concern for you, or have you seen that kind of die down, or what are your thoughts on that?
yeah. So if you're mismanaging your properties and not taking action soon enough, then that could be a concern. And you won't be able to, like some states have strict laws or had strict laws, and that would really put you in a bad situation. So you just got to be staying on top of it. And the threat there could be like, hey, if we've got two options, like if you don't pay, like eventually you're going to be getting evicted and it's going to be super costly. You'll never be able to get a place to rent you again because you'll have an eviction on your record and you'll have your funds garnished eventually. Or let's just get you out of here. Let's just have a clean move out. Like we just got to give them the two scenarios and make it seem like the clean move out is just a way better option. It's like, oh yeah, I'll just do that. That's going to be way better. Let's get out. So,
Okay, very good. Well, if people have further questions, what's the best way to get a hold of you if people have more questions?
yeah, if you join the free mini course, you'll get texted with the link for your login link, and you can just text that same number back. It goes to our support line. And so you can text us for any questions or support there.
Okay, awesome. So calls to action. Again, I'm a marketer, so I always end with calls to action. But I would say calls to action is if you are in any way interested in getting started with real estate, is just join the free course. Again, I love that there is a free option to just kind of get your feet a little bit wet and see, hey, is this going to be something that I want to commit to before, I put in more money to get into that. So just hop at this link and first name, phone number, email, and you can start going through. You said, I think 12 videos that'll just kind of give you a flavor for what you're going to be in for. And then if you really like what you see, you really like Dallas and the way he presents things, then, it go to book a call if you want help in this journey and then start taking action. I love that that's step 3 because that's a lot of people miss that step. There's a lot of talking and planning and dreaming. And then at some point you got to just start taking some action to get towards your goals. So love that. So, well, thank you, Dallas. I appreciate you hopping on here today. Appreciate you, audience, for your questions and everything like that. But yeah, Dallas, hopefully we can stay in touch. Maybe we can have you back on in the future. But thanks for coming on, sharing your expertise.
Thanks for having me, James. I appreciate it. We'll chat soon.
All right. Take care, everybody. Hope you all have a great rest of the day.